I just want to throw in a couple of other things here. I don't know if people have read Steven Pinker's book. It came out about 3 years ago. It's called The Better Angels of Our Nature, The Decline in Human Violence. It's a really interesting book. Yeah, he gets these, unfortunately most of his data sets are sort of Western data sets. That's where the most data are. But he has all of his graphs, they're like, well, for you, they're like that. And he has to use a logarithmic scale for most of them, such as the decline in violence been. He explains the 20th century away in a way which I don't completely buy. That's quite a blip on a graph of declining violence. But what's interesting about this is that his analysis leads him to say that he sees 5 core things which have changed, which have improved our ability to meet that positive peace goal, which I put up earlier. One is improvements in governance, so I mentioned that. One is he talks about the Enlightenment and the skepticism, the growth of skepticism as being absolutely critical to the improvement of peace. He talks about feminization. He uses that to mean, I guess, that a society, as it becomes more peaceful, it doesn't have to be so martial. And so therefore, the feminine side in society, both in men and women, is allowed to come out. You get less statues of men with guns and swords, and more statues of other things in society. Commerce and the growth of empathy. And he has this great theory about how the growth of empathy is partly due to the rise of the novel, which is a great book anyway. I just put it up there because International Alert's not the only expert on this. And then there are these peace-building and state-building goals which were agreed internationally a few years ago, which also map quite well to the things we were mentioning. So I just wanted to say quickly, very quickly, so peace-building, if I talk about peace-building that we do as International Alert, a few very quick examples of how we do it, just to give a sense. Well, I'll explain why in a minute. So in the Congo, we work with communities, very much at the community level, to build the capacity to manage very local conflicts, mostly conflicts over land, effectively. And we've seen a real increase, like from sort of 20 to 60% in the number of local conflicts which are managed to the satisfaction of local communities by building inter-ethnic, inter-gender, inter-age local governance groups and helping them skill them up to be able to manage these kinds of issues. We work on cross-border trade. We have a program working with women's advocates for increasing women's participation in politics at all levels, from community up to national. In Uganda, we work a lot on oil, because we've all seen what happens happening with oil in other countries. Nigeria is a great case in point. So we work with parliamentarians in Uganda to help them make sure that the oil laws were written in a way which was conducive to peaceful development. And work with communities on the same thing. We've done a lot of work on land in lots of countries. In Uganda, after the war in northern Uganda, worked with business people to develop a code of conduct so that when businesses are entering into the sort of post-conflict northern Uganda, they have a better understanding of how to approach people in terms of purchasing or getting access to land to avoid exacerbating conflict and contribute to peace. Work on fisheries in Uganda as well, because economics is critical to peace. We do a lot of work now in Tunisia, where the largest number of extremist fighters to ISIS are coming from, to try and help local communities understand how to stop these, mostly young men, becoming so alienated that they disappear off to Libya or Syria and get engage their energies in local development instead. And in the Philippines, we work with business people to help them advocate with the government and rebels in terms of influencing the peace process. So the point I'm making there is, and I could go on and on and on, is the paths to peace are diverse. And so it's good to have peace goal 16 in there, but actually you can build peace through working on almost probably any of these things. It's really about how you do it, not just what you're aiming for. The report, which I think you mentioned earlier, that we wrote last year, called Peace Through Prosperity, it chose the title very carefully. It's not inviting economic development experts to come and join the peace builders. It's us wanting to say, can we help you? Because you guys are doing something tremendously important, which is about economic growth, economic development. Can we help you to make sure that that's an economic development which is useful for peace, as well as for all the other things that the growing economy is good for? And I will just finish, if I can, with a few very quick sort of conclusions. I don't think they're on here, they're not. One is that Natsios quote, really hold on to that. Development is not a series of projects. It's this strange thing which happens when society somehow gets better and no one quite knows how to plan it, even though every politician will claim that he or she does. Development does actually require conflict. It's just that we have to try and make sure it's a non-violent conflict which is managed as successfully as possible. I think really focusing on the outcomes rather than trying to pretend that there is a pathway to that outcome is critical. And then in a given context, if we're trying to aim for that outcome, an improvement in a reduction in inequality, for example, let's not focus on inequality as the word which has to be in everything we do. Let's focus on what are the obstacles to inequality, and what are the enabling issues, and work with those. Probably we should avoid using the word development as often as possible. I think the reification of these words, which have so much currency in cities like Oxford, is quite dangerous. Development for that woman I spoke about in that village in, was it Congo? I doubt that she thinks about development. I think she conceptualizes it in very different ways, and we should respect that and make sure we don't undermine that. The SDGs are better, but there's still something slightly platonic about them. So to the extent possible, let's try to mind that gap, and make sure that actually we don't jump across that gap and we don't allow them to become sort of a platonic version of progress. They are messy. They should be messy, because development is incredibly messy. But let's treat them as hooks and steps and runs, and see where we can use what's been agreed by all the governments of the world in support of the agenda we particularly have. I think election time is a really important time to do that in countries which have elections. And I would say, going back to the question I posed at the beginning, are the SDGs useful for peace? Yes, they are, but we must use them in a very intelligent and careful way, and remind ourselves that although having goal 16 is really important, there is peace throughout this tapestry, just as there is inequality reduction throughout this tapestry. These things are really intermeshed. And with that, thanks very much.